And so I think that those are really, very interesting trends and developments working out with the breakdown of the Washington Consensus, which I hope is broken down. I think it's broken down in the academy, but I don't know that it's broken down politically. And the breakdown of the Pendencia, we have an opportunity to make more progress in understanding the variety of markets, not necessarily the variety of capitalism, but the variety of markets, and what are all the differences in the way we put market economies together, how they can be run, and what the political correlations of that actually are. So let me then move to a next point in my analysis, is try to link this together with the American experience. And I'm sorry to spend so much time as I'm going to the next few minutes talk about the American experience, but since the Americans exported this mess, it might as well be something that we should talk about, is how that came to be and what that's telling us about it. I find the crisis awful. I can see it affecting my children. I mean, I'm doing all right. I'm old enough that it's not going to affect me all that much. But I see the impact it's having on my children who are starting their careers, and it's having a very bad effect on their lives, as I think it's happening to people in the 20s and 30s who are having problems with the job market and stuff. But I think more generally, the part that I do like about it is it's shaking up a lot of intellectual ideas. And one of the things that it shakes up is something that I've always disliked, which is the American academy and society's conviction of its specialness and its difference, the fact that categories that work for other people don't apply to us. And I've never liked that. I remember the origins of politics in hard times is to some degree when I was in my youth, and I was involved with some colleagues at Harvard who were very unhappy. We were comparativists, and we were very unhappy with the fact that all the courses in the United States treated the United States completely in non-comparison with any other country. Nothing about the experience of other countries was ever brought into that. This wasn't true in the rest of the world, where people would ask questions like, why is there no socialist party in the United States? That lots of people were interested in that. Or people wrote on comparative slavery. I had a history colleague who wrote wonderful things on comparative slavery. But in a study of American politics, that didn't happen. There were no comparative categories. And this made several of us very unhappy, and so the origins of that book actually are is that some of us got together to give a course in American political development. This was before APD actually became a category at American universities. And I volunteered to give a lecture on the American response to the Great Recession of 1873-96 in comparative perspective, and how to locate what the Americans did in comparison to what France, Germany, Sweden, and other countries did. And I had such a good time writing that I kept at it and eventually produced Politics in Hard Times, precisely to locate in comparative perspective. So now what fascinates me about this is that there is now being taken seriously, that when I studied corporate governance that I've been doing for the past dozen years, there's this tremendous celebration, all the literature on corporate governance in the United States talks about how wonderful the American system is virtuous. It has excellent quality corporate governance, and that's why its economy does so well. And that's Lopez Delana, it's an LLSV in the common law, civil law distinction that they have spent so much time on, which I think is a very foolish thing, and also a very prejudiced thing, because the common law versus civil law distinction, the way people use it, they always talk about the common law is superior and civil law is worse. What they mean is the Anglo-American corporate governance model is superior, and the trouble with people in the Latin culture is it's inferior. Of course, they neglect that Germany and Scandinavia also have civil law. But I think that is a kind of cultural prejudice, that argument. And so I'm actually kind of pleased, in a Schadenfreude sort of way, to see that the supposedly perfectly great American corporate governance system has shown to have tremendous weaknesses and is being re-examined and rethought about, at least in the academy. Politically, it's not being rethought about, I think, very much in the US. But I know, if you remember very vigorously, that when the Asian financial crisis happened 15 years ago, why did it happen? Well, these people were going around saying the trouble with Asia is it has crony capitalism. Of course, they were putting together, if crony capitalism really explained the defects of the financial crisis, then how did it grow so much? Why was there so much growth in this crony capitalism country? But crony capitalism is a way of dismissing it. So one of the things that I find very interesting is to see the appearance in the literature on the US in the crisis is the appearance of crony capitalism as a category. One example I give you of that is Simon Johnson's book called 13 Bankers. What's it called? 13 Bankers, I think it's called. Simon Johnson would be very good for you to see because you can see all the tensions of how to understand this contained in that book. He was chief economist at the IMF for a while. And so the theme of the book is, in a way, gee, isn't that interesting? While I was at IMF, people would run crises. They'd have financial crises. And then they would come to us and they wanted to bail us out. Who was it who wanted to get bailed out? It was the financial elites in these countries, or industrial elites, who had taken on too much risk, which then caused a financial crisis. No, it was not a stabilization risk, it was a financial crisis risk. They get on too much right, and they wanted us to bail them out. And we said, oh, no, you can't do that. That's not the proper way to run a market economy. And then Simon Johnson said, so here is the United States doing the same thing, because they took on too much risk, there was a crisis, and then they run to the Federal Reserve and the Congress to get bailed out. And so Simon, I think, quite correctly says, gosh, I heard this argument before, and I've seen this phenomenon before. And so he then asked himself the question about, is there crony capitalism at stake going on here? And then he starts to speculate about, yeah, he says yes, and he starts to speculate about why. And I'll get back to it in a minute, because the why is very interesting, because you see in his why a struggle on a kind of a political economy of explanation. The whys that he looks at involve all these debates between a traditional non-structuralist pluralist account and a more structuralist account as to why. By structuralist, I mean what used to be called in Europe the Miliband influence debate. In the United States, which is pluralism versus Lindblom. That is, the phrase too big to fail. If we think about what does too big to fail mean? Too big to fail means that the banks are so large that we can't afford to let them fail. Why can't we afford to let them fail? Is that a description or a political explanation? Why can't we afford to let them fail? Well, if we can't afford to let them fail because they are so vital to the economy that the entire economy would crash, which is, okay, the finance is like water and energy. You know, if the energy workers go on strike, you can't let that happen. It shuts the economy down, and the water people go on strike. Well, finance is like that. It's so vital to the rest of the economy that if you don't keep it going, everything crashes. That's not true of the auto industry. Okay, we had this big debate when Obama became president. We were bailing out banks like crazy. Would we also bail out the auto industry? Well, you can't argue too very easily that you absolutely desperately need General Motors, because you can always buy Toyotas or Fiats or other things. But this argument, the argument that was made about bailing out General Motors was a kind of a structural argument that General Motors is so interconnected with so many other pieces of the American economy that if it failed, there would be so much unemployment that the cost of that would be greater than the cost of the bailout. So that's kind of a similar sort of argument. It's kind of a structural argument that they're too important to the function of the economy to let them collapse. Well, if we reflect on that, what does that mean exactly? What do we mean by it's too important to let them collapse? And the structure argument versus the traditional pluralist argument is quite different, right? The pluralist argument was that why does finance have so much power, which is the thing that fascinates me in the US right now. This is Simon Johnson, and all the people who are writing all these books saying that they have too much influence, too much influence, too much. Why? How would we explain that?